said that we are at the beginning of a revolution that is fundamentally changing the way we live, our work, and relate to one another. In its scale, scope, and complexity, what he considers to be the fourth industrial revolution is unlike anything humankind has experienced before, close quote. In other words, there is a complete acceptance that we either adapt or die. And the choice to die does not exist. And therefore, ours is to seek ways to adapt and to ensure that we are well prepared for this fourth industrial revolution. And they go even further, talk about how the systems are integrated to deliver what is now being referred to as a motion picture, artificial intelligence, that will influence how cinematography as we used to know it would change. Therefore, ladies and gentlemen, as we now meet here, getting the feedback from the various commissions, we would like to hear, how do you intend to take South Africa's film industry forward? How is it going to adapt to change? Among those is the issue of skills and training. It's about education and the content of our curriculum. But not only in a traditional school thought, but also in all the schools that produce and train our young people in the film industry. Minister have tried and done his best to begin to put at a thrust of all these things, this concept of intergenerational mix and the transfer of skills. And that as we move forward, even our own approach must emphasize the issue of academies. And therefore then, as we now gonna be listening to you, what we are looking for are the concrete interventions that will inform our 5-year implementation plan. We did request that in your program, please zoom in on the questions that were raised for each commission, because we believe out of that we can then develop this 5-year implementation plan. But also, before we leave here, we believe it will be quite good that we have a pledge that we will sign as a collective on implementing the resolutions of this summit, so that indeed it does not become a talk show, but that with that pledge, which we will then share with everyone, we can hold each other accountable if we do not play our part. So we will present that pledge towards the end and see that we all agree and be able to then sign that pledge per our organizations, which most of them were represented in the reference group. Welcome back. This is not a graveyard session, as people would say, after having had a long, big lunch, and then they say, I can't talk. I must remind you, if anyone sleeps here, sleeping on duty is misconduct. So don't sleep, focus, and take notes copiously. We can just promise that all the content of the presentations here, the Minister insisted again this morning that we must make sure that all the presentations are available and accessible. And Minister will work on making sure that they get posted on websites, but also that wherever possible, we find mechanism to distribute to all people who are here, so that they don't have to write down the speeches. Others were taking photos of those presentations. But we will make sure that we've got a compact report as well as all the speeches that were, or presentations that were made, so that we can access them. I hope that Commission 1 is ready. Lebone, Are we ready? Which group is ready? The facilitators, can they all come forward? Okay, there is just, they want to dramatize, film people. They want to convert everything into film, into movie emotions. So they want, so they want to dramatize something of what transpired yesterday. Can we then allow, are we ready, Lebon again? While all the facilitators, please come forth as you will be the ones delivering your reports. And we would expect you to be succinct, direct to the point. But as you all come forth, can we then ask that we just have that short clip of what transpired yesterday? Are we ready? Linda, who is loading? Oh, there it is. Thanks. There is no sound.
I was actually asking myself, how does an engineer actually come and speak about film? What people don't know is that I'm actually a failed artist.
I actually have a criminal record for showing the James Bond film Live and Let Die to an audience of color. So that's how crazy the business was in those days.
I have observed that many young black women, it is easier to work for a production house rather than to strive to produce a film under their own companies. Why? Many of us thought that we would enter this industry and make our own films and make it.
What's the point of having great apple farmers with great apples at the end of the year that rot at the end because there's nowhere to sell them? We need exhibition because ticket sales is the heart of the movie business.
We, the youth, have no access to events like these.
We are saying now, for all those overseas productions that shoot here, that are also eligible for support because they bring export revenue into South Africa, we're not going to support them if they are not including black suppliers in their value chain.
Producers are not happy with the Mzansi budgets. They are insulting. They end up having to use students. You actually can't produce decent work with those budgets. Yet Mnet is making a lot of money from us. If broadcasters are going to take all copyright, then the budgets need to be really high. There has to be a trade-off. You don't want to give us copyright, give us bigger budgets.
I came here because I was told something great is happening at the Carlton Center.
Our targets for the financial year ending in March 2019, which will then be increased, is 325 million rand for film funding, film and the media chain funding. This includes 200 million for black industrialists, 80 million for women, 90 million for youth, and these are our key priority areas.
Training and development at NFVF, we commit 10.3 million rands in the next financial year.
Minister, we are
asking you, commanding you as the captain of the ship, to take that to the president of the country.
The project of nation building in this country will succeed if this industry succeeds.
Okay, we are ready now to Commission 1? Okay.
It's a double act.
It's a double act.
It's a double act.
What in our fazi?
Our commission was basically around story, intellectual property, contracts, audiences, and branding the South African and film and television industry. We spent a lot of time in the commission really talking to each other and finding out where we were and what yesterday was really about finding each other and finding what we wanted to say. This morning was trying to really craft the recommendations. It was sometimes very robust and very energetic, but I think that there were a lot of people who were able to speak and able to put their point of view across in terms of the recommendations. In terms of the final, we didn't really necessarily have enough time to finalize the last portion of the recommendation, which included the contracts and the audiences, but we took that from yesterday's discussion. So the group hasn't finalized, and I think that's really about one of the things is that this is a lot of work, and the amount of time that we had to cover this very, very broad spectrum wasn't necessarily enough. So I think that means that this isn't an engagement that can sit and be finished here, because it's a lot of work, and it's a lot of thinking work, and also it's a lot about finding each other in the way in which we finalize and craft everything. I think we managed to do that. There was contention about a particular area, but we came to an understanding that we might not necessarily agree, but we've come with a recommendation from the group. And Taryn is going to read all the recommendations that we put. So that's the double act. I was doing the introduction, she's going to do the hard part.
Ketiwe did the hard part, and that was facilitating. So thanks very much to her from our group. I'm just going to answer the questions that we managed to get to. The first one on story, what makes a film authentically South African? That's quite an interesting one to start off with. We've come up with, we recommend that our diversity is our identity, our truth, our stories in our languages. Then added to that, diversity is our identity in South Africa. How do South African stories get told in the context of international co-productions? Reintroduction of a progressive culture of co-production. Encourage broadcasters to co-produce with us. The SABC, as the public broadcaster, must be permitted to enter into co-productions. In other words, remove ministerial approval as per the PMFA, so that our stories can travel and we can empower our producers. We don't feel that pre-sales are progressive. The next question, what will it take for stories to resonate with local and global audiences? Access to those stories in terms of subtitling, dubbing, audio description. We also recommend stringent measures to be put in place. For example, perhaps a levy for international content that comes into South Africa, so that we can fund both the development and marketing of our content, as both these areas are grossly underfunded, which should include local and international marketing and distribution. Perhaps explore taxation on Netflix, YouTube, Amazon, and cinema release, particularly from big studios and international broadcast content with regards to contributions to local production and film funds. These proceeds from levies and fines need to be reinvested into the sector. Industry bodies can assist in the co-production and smooth the co-production process, make the process more user-friendly, tax incentives for companies investing in our sector, perhaps local content quotas for cinemas, and looking at private copying levies plying back into our sector. Intellectual property rights. This is the this is the area that kept us busy for a very, very long time. Our recommendation, according to, does the proposed copyright amendment bill and IP regime that will create a sustainable audiovisual industry? We suggest a regulatory impact assessment for the whole of the CAB to get a clear understanding of what it means, and that this impact assessment is made available to all industry bodies.
Prior to being finally passed.
Is South African content undervalued compared to international content? We feel our recommendation is an interministerial commission or committee, the IMC of the DTI, DAC, DIRCO, etc., on copyright and local content development and preservation.
And somebody was also saying that we need to have the education department be part of that interministerial department, as they currently have books which are not necessarily South African books on the syllabus, so that we South Africanize the syllabus.
And we felt that social cohesion must drive this process. Are current rates for films realistic? In our booklet it said rates per minute, which we felt was relevant to television. We feel that more research was needed, whether the price paid by the buyer is realistic. Is enough being done to protect indigenous property rights, the oral history, customs, and traditions of the people in South Africa? We recommend support for cultural repatriation and reappropriation. The Presidential Fourth IR Commission requires input from creative communities, including authors, unions, prosumers, artists, users, and designers, for a more inclusive and developmental approach. Then in terms of the contracts, it says need for standardization of contracts and transparency in rates that are paid in the industry is important. Is the government effectively creating an enabling environment for this? The DTI mentioned that they would become involved in legislated terms of trade that set out the terms of the relationship between those who commission and those who create. Obviously, all industry bodies would like to be part of that process. Do industry organizations have an agency to influence terms of trade? We feel that there is a huge need to empower industry bodies with funding so that a strong secretariat can give clear input as the legislative framework develops. It's clear the weakness of industry bodies is that they are run by volunteers who still have to run their own businesses. This will enable them to have input to the DAC, DTI, DOC, NFVF, ICASA, etc., on regulations and drafting of contracts and legislation. We also feel that collective agreements could protect all of those involved in the process. Is the role of ICASA in regulating terms of trade for commissioned content an effective one? For films commissioned by broadcasters, communication is required with content creators and ICASA around the terms of trade for commissioned content. Then we get onto the audience. What do audiences want, and are content creators and broadcasters responding to this? We felt an audience study was commissioned by the NFVF, and box office results seem to reflect that content creators are responding to this study. To what extent do audience research and trends inform marketing and distribution strategies for local content? We feel that the current government funding models in South Africa speak more to development and production, and perhaps more focus should be on incentivizing marketing and distribution. Is the South African viewership enough to allow us to be local before we go global? Are we developing audiences for South African content beyond television? We recommend incentivizing marketing and distribution to grow local cinema viewership and create a smart audience development strategy. Also to create access for all our people, including those with disabilities, to gain access to films, including people living in rural areas. Brand South Africa. What are we selling? We feel a good universal story will sell. The more specific the world of the story is, the more universal it is. How does Brand South Africa manage local and international trade policies? There were many, many differing and dissenting views. So we recommend a process that we need a branding campaign that is implemented under the custodianship of the NFVF in the form of either a competition, a call for submissions, and or a branding or ad agency, including the IPO, the IBFC, and SWIFT, who be able to assist in positioning and popularizing the campaign. Some of the views from our commission were perhaps to exclude the wood at the end of whatever we're going to call ourselves. So not Sally Wood, rather look at things like Mzansi Movies, South African Independence, Motherland Stories, Azania, and some people were of the opinion that if we have more of an ethos and a conviction of how we tell stories, that will speak to our branding. I thank you.
Thank you. That's us.
Yes, no. Because of time, we will not interact with the report back yet. We will rather ask that you park your questions, and then maybe after 2 commissions, because there are 5, we just have clarities and whatever, and we will define the process going forward to refine these recommendations. But let us take commission 2, and then we will then take clarification questions on both. Thanks.
Honourable Minister, friends, and all our special guests, good afternoon to you. My name is Jack Devnarayan, and I have the privilege of presenting to you on behalf of Commission 2, which is Policy, Structure and Institutions. I'm a one-man act, as opposed to Commission 1, who sent 2 women. It was decided in the Commission, in the wisdom of Commission 2, that they should rather have 1 man to do the job of 2 women. Initially, I'd like to offer thanks, and this was an important point for Commission 2. We wanted to extend our thanks to Afeli Makwanya, who was our facilitator, who stepped in at a certain point when we discovered that we didn't have one. To Nimrod, for his skills as a scribe and for the use of his machine from which I now read. I'm going to go through the questions first so that you have an idea of the context, and the recommendations that flow from that will then make sense to you. Our first question: are there institutions that support the industry, that is the DAC, NFVF, DTI, SIFSA, SABC, and the IDC, and provincial film commissions, are they still relevant? If yes, are they funded, structured and administered for optimization and the delivery of their objectives? To begin with, it is the consensus of Commission 2 that most of those organizations are indeed relevant. However, SIFSA is not. It is recommended by the Commission that the NFVF should be adequately funded in order to meet its mandate, and that funding should be rebalanced towards development, production, research, and training. all duly constituted and mandated bodies that are funded by government must be subject to adequate oversight and accountability. It is strongly recommended, in fact, and this wording was specifically chosen, it is strongly recommended that the NFVF and the NAC are not consolidated at council level, as proposed in the revised white paper on arts, culture and heritage of 2017. Further, it is also strongly recommended that professional advisory panels, those are the panels which review applications, are not disbanded. Question 2. Are the current funding models in line with international best practice and new business models? We answer that by saying current funding models do not completely meet the demands of the local market. Our Commission recommends that we introduce an innovation fund to support innovation and creativity in the context of the fourth industrial revolution. That there are adjustments needed on existing funding models, and these models must undergo regular reviews to meet the evolving demands of its market. Youth and women project funding must be ring-fenced and prioritized. Question 3. Is the government funding system administered fairly, timeously, and efficiently? Is it responsive to the needs of the industry? In a word, no. Excessive red tape causes delays, and there are capacity issues, which we all acknowledge. These systems need to be more reliable and consistent. It is recommended by the Commission that government funding processes are streamlined and integrated, including interdepartmental cooperation, so that funding is more strategic, expeditious, and accessible to filmmakers. It was a point of discussion in our Commission that came up that funding indeed should not just be from a project-to-project basis, but certainly should be funding strategically the industry and the structure of the industry as a business, which was a point well made. There needs to be greater accountability and transparency in how funding is allocated and awarded. Question 4. How do we create a harmonious and enabling policy and regulatory environment for a sustainable industry? Are the rates, fees, royalties, exploitation fees on different platforms and collection agencies sustainable? Our Commission discussed and agreed that there should be greater cooperation between government departments. For example, SARS, SARF, the Department of Labor, Departments of Arts and Culture, Education, ICASA, and even the Competition Commission. Government departments should be more responsive to industry proposals rather than ticking a box of consultation. We know very well that government departments have a mandate to take around roadshows, to meet, to consult with stakeholders, which is one of my favorite phrases. But what comes out of that consultation process? It can't just be a tick box exercise. There have to be realizable, implementable proposals that come from that process. There needs to be a regular review of policies to keep up with new developments. The Department of Arts and Culture needs to engage with ICASA and the Department of Communications around frameworks to allow greater access to internet and for cheaper data. Rates, fees, and exploitations are too low for creatives and are not sustainable and are not in line with international best practice. We need to create policy certainty around the status of the artist. And here we are talking about artists as freelancers. We recommend that they be awarded collective bargaining rights in order to bring about a revolution of empowerment for freelancers. Question 5. what must be done to encourage the private sector in the industry? It is recommended by the Commission that there is engagement by the DAC with SARS around Section 12(0) and Section 12(j) of the Income Tax Act to encourage private investment by allowing for film investment to be deducted against tax rather than deductions against income, and that these clauses be extended to non-commissioned and other audiovisual content. Those are the recommendations, and as I conclude, it was also noted in our discussion in Commission 2 that there are certain universal principles that came up in the course of the plenary yesterday and today that we wish to recommit ourselves to. We have got to appreciate that the 5-year implementation plan must take place. This is the reason that this report back session is so critical. We have gone back to do the work in our commissions. And here, each commission stands before you as a collective to say, these are the recommendations that we want to have implemented as part of that 5-year plan. The second point is that we must encourage continuous engagement with the reference groups. They must be empowered. They must be coordinated. And again, the work must continue because it is only the work of the reference groups in this context that will realize the 5-year implementation plan. And finally, we support the recommendation by the Minister in that a once-off summit is simply never going to achieve a thing. We look forward to an annual summit, and we will be back doing the work that we need to do for the industry that we all serve. Thank you.
One man, two women, men. No, why does it sound sexist, this statement? No, thank you very much. Can we then allow questions, comments on the two? I'm not sure why is he running away because he must answer questions. Can we then open up? Are there questions, comments on Commission, either Commission 1 or Commission 2, or both? 1. Oh, let's start here, because I'm already here. So 1. Anyone else here? Okay. Anyone here? Anyone in this row? Minister's row? Yes. And then 2, okay, 3, 4, 5. Okay, let's start.
Thank you, Chairperson.
Please indicate whether Commission 1 or Commission 2.
Oh, it was to Commission, the one that was dealing with the institutions. I think it was Commission 2. There was discussion about...
Your name is?
I beg your pardon, sir. It's Dimitri Martinez. There was discussion about the role of the government agencies that support the film sector. Was perhaps anything discussed about the role of the provinces? Because it seems a lot of it has been about support at a national level, and certainly there seems to be a lot of finance or able to unlock funds at provincial and in fact even local level. What role do the 3 tiers of government have in that? Thank you.
2. Yes, the leader in the industry. Wow.
Thank you.
Just the name and then...
The name is Glenn Uchebe Masukwane. It's not a dissenting voice, but clearly I feel if we go to commission, we need to be principled in taking on notes. The question of repositioning the South African content industries globally within the context of BRICS as a policy issue, I think has been left out, and that's a grave mistake. And I'm not pointing a finger at my colleagues, but we've got to understand the world in which we're living in. We have to access and build on the relationships, especially within the BRICS context. Thank you.
Maybe it's my fault that I did not ask for additions from the commission members, so that if there is something absolutely critical that was missed by the rapporteurs, we are able to then to capture it. But we also presume that the full report have that detail. But thanks very much. Chairperson.
Yeah, Sanbonan, Thabiso Mhlamvu, the chairperson of SACAIF in Gauteng. Yeah, well, I think I'm very happy that the issue of CIFSA is discussed in all the sectors. So I think it's about time that they go to the conference and we elect the new leadership. And the witnesses here, they just said CIFSA is not existing. So it must go to conference. And I'm very happy with the first commission that they spoke more about the languages, which is a big problem in terms of producing a film of that has Zulu, Xhosa, and other languages in South Africa. So I think that must be taken serious this year because the theme is also indigenous languages. Thank you very much.
My name is Sipati Bulane Hopper. I was in Commission 1. I think that I should applaud Ndate Zola Maseko for what he did with the return of Sarah Bartman, and also what has happened in Ethiopia with the return of the obelisks. It shows how possible it is for us to reclaim our cultural content and back it and get it to come back home. So what we said in that commission was that the audiovisual cultural content that resides overseas, and I think there's a huge amount of it that is there. That is it possible for us to repatriate that? Because those are archives that were made of us, that are from us. And I think our access to them in the 21st century is critical. Because I think that is big enough to even allow us to put up a history television channel that would be called the African Television Channel that just focuses on our history as Africa, as a whole. But I think also to look into archives that we have in South Africa as well, because it is true that our filmmakers really do struggle to get access to those archives. So whoever owns them, there has to be a negotiated agreement for people to access them. So that cultural repatriation and the UNESCO declaration supports it. I think it's something that we need to take on.
Thanks, Spadi. Frank.
Thank you, Chair. Mine was just a suggestion in terms of having all the commissions reporting, because I'm from Commission 4, and some of the things discussed in Commission 1 and Commission 2 are dealing with other commissions. So you might find questions are being asked and other commission has responded to it differently. So if we have all the commissions, then we can have additions and then take it from that will be my suggestion. Thank you.
As a democratic program director, I assume that the clap of hands means that it's seconded. So can those then who already had their hands up keep them down? And we allow Commission 3 to report, and I won't have to stand up. Commission 4 does the same, and we also ask Commission 5 without them being called, so that then we also save time of these intermissions. Is that fine? As long as those who say I'm done, and the one who comes up and says, now I represent Commission 4, now I represent Commission 5. Can we do it that way? Commission 3. Oh, it's still on the floor.
All protocol observed. Siyanibingelela bakwethu. Igama longisano kaMthethwa. Ngihamba noma wami lana phambi kwami okuyena besisebenza naye. We are here to do a report yethu on Commission 3, which is known as ukuphazanyiswa kanye nokucabanga okuhlukile noma okuphusile kuyona inqubo nomsebenzi, which is disruption and innovation in the value chain. Phambi kokuthi phambi kokuthi sidlulise ireport lethu bakwethu ngizocela ukuthi nisibekezelele asizogxila kakhulu embuzweni ngoba imibuzo le ebiyibuzwa incwadi ithi ukufana kakhulu, so i-presentation yethu esizoyenza sivele sabe sesiphendula yonke into umbuzo ulandelana. Kodwa baba ngokubiza bathi baba minister, njoba besikhuluma nge-disruption na-innovation abantu bebabheka i-technology kakhulu, but disruption and innovation is not only focused on technology, but the real disruption and innovation is the content okuwukuthi we as content creators or as content developers produce. And if we turn a blind eye on that content, because technology cannot function without content, then there's no need for this presentation esizoyenza. So isicelo sethu sisodwa baba ukuthi njoba sizonethulela leli phepha noma le report yethu namhlanje ayiphelelanga njoba inje. We still waiting ukuthi abantu bafake more submissions, because we are talking to the industry. We are not talking to SASFET or SACHIVE, but we are addressing matters of the industry. So ngale kokuchitha isikhathi nginikeza nama wami.
Thanks you. So I'm just going to translate some section that you left out, which is we had a number of questions, and we have, they more or less overlap. So we're just presenting an answer to all of these questions. And obviously the first question is, are content producers and businesses, broadcasters, mobile service providers in South Africa responding to the disruption and consumer needs? And we're saying yes in little bits, but there's no conversation across. And then we address all the other questions underneath. So I'm going to kick off. So the first thing that we thought, which speaks towards the South African Audiovisual Foundation. What is the new, sorry, I've forgotten the name of it, the acronym. So we decided that an intergovernmental task team between science and technology, CSIR, arts and culture, etc., has to be set up to integrate and allow spheres to work together for the film and TV and digital content producers. There needs to be a policy harmonization and integration. Next.
Okulandelayo bakwethu is to bring companies working with technology, likes of Denali and etc., to innovate alongside the industry, private capital and tech knowledge. Should aid in the development of the sector, because the reality of it is that the sector is not growing. And up until we invite those, we call them our stakeholders, we invite them to come and be part of this summit and to be part of production as a whole, then we will manage to change the industry as a whole. Iphutha lenzekile babu minister ukuthi sibe nomsebenzi omuhle ongaka kodwa kwenze ukuthi all these companies that form stakeholders, most of them, they are not here. They were supposed to be here so that they can also make pledges and they can also account to the industry. Okubalekile kakhulu baba njoba uhleli nathi namhlanje ngicela nje ukuthi ngokuthume ngoba umongameli uyithumile mina sengithuma wena. Ngicela ukuthi baba ukuhamba usele eHome Affairs ubabuze eHome Affairs ukuthi njoba makwenziwa i-co-production phesheya baza nemali bayiletha la eSouth Africa iHome Affairs njenge-industry senzelani sicela iHome Affairs isibhadale ngoba iyasikweleta njenge-industry.
Okay. In order to allow for that, for private industry and private capital to invest in the sector, we need to form an appropriate vehicle for private investment.
Ensure that we create collaboration with all big telecommunication companies. Ucell C ngabe ukhona la endlini. uVodacom ukhona la endlini. Uphi yena uMTN. Abanye abasikweletayo. Ngicela ningibhalele incwadi nesho ukuthi indaba ningekho la endlini because you need to account. This industry is one of the industries okuwukuthi it creates a whole lot of opportunities. But this industry has been deprived of imali ekoleta ilamanye ama-industry. It's through our industry that we are able to bring all these industries into one umbrella and create content. We as the content creators, sibayenzela umsebenzi, but we are not compensated. So it's time that we have all these companies and all these stakeholders, babuye, bayasikweleta.
So, and just to add to that, that there should actually be a levy on profit made from airtime sales that goes into content funding. And I'll do the next one. Okay. Then that we wanted to make sure that, and I think it was mentioned in previous the previous commissions, that we need the reference group that has been working towards the summit to be included and to be represented on all those kind of government bodies.
Mangqhubeka. Creating a site where information is collected about all opportunities in terms of funding available and facilitators for entry levels. Honorable Minister, njengentsha siyahlupheka. Sihluphekiswa ukuthi njoba sinama-company amancane ukuthi abizwa ngokuthi ama-small companies. Our companies have been small companies for more than 5 years. Ngoba yini, when we put applications requesting for AMA funds, we are always judged as if they are judging big production companies. You need to calm down. There is no way this industry is going to grow as long as nisihlukumeza kanjena. And the food Babs Minister, njoba sishilo siyintsha, we are here to take charge of the industry. The industry belongs to young people, and as young people, we are waiting for you as our elders to pass the torch so that sizoqhubeka sigijime siye phambili la nishiye khona.
In terms of facilitating some of the development of youth, to create the African Film Institute that allows for a focus on storytelling. It's a storytelling hub. It's a storytelling for all platforms, and it's literally the African Film Institute.
Demand that SABC has a hub, partly staffed with young people. Honorable Minister, as young people, we want to be in power. We want our power as young people. Sesikhathele ukubona ogogo nomkhulu behleli phezu kwethu misleader futhi kuukuthi nalemgomo nemithetho bayibekayo ayikhulumi nathi inhlobo siyintsha. Sicela ukuthi njoba siyintsha sikhula kuukuthi nifuna ukuthi sibe abo businessmen bakusasa, nifuna ukuthi sibe abaphathi bakusasa. Sicela ukuthi industry nabazali bethu babe neqiniso kithina sizingane zabo, because there's no leadership kuukuthi nisifihlela information. So sicela ukuphatha iSABC ngoba wonke umuntu bekakhala. Njengentsha siyangena eSABC kusasa siyosebenza.
Okay, I'm just going to add to that because the group said staffed partly with youth.
Yeah, partly, but mina ngithatha yonke.
It was an innovation hub that really looks at what helping the SABC to innovate and to commission appropriately for young people, but staffed with other people that know a little bit about technology. Yeah. The next point that we thought that would really nurture the industry was to create more collective creative factories, creative hubs that really work towards content innovation in terms of cross-pollination. That includes robotic industries, gaming, film producers, writers, and distribution platforms. It's literally a creative hub, and more of those. There's one, in Joburg at the moment, but we need to make more of those in different centers.
Okay, isilungu sifunda isiZulu. Babu Minister, sicela ukuthi wonke ama-existing companies, whether it's gear or any technological company okuwukuthi isebenza nathi ku-creative industry, we need you to build programs and classes for young people especially with the technology or the equipment that you build. Because right now we have a situation where our national broadcaster is dying and the bulawa poor picture quality le khona sibona imihla namalanga. Sesikhathele ukukhala. Sicela ukuthi ninike nithini responsibility yokuthi sifake nama-class akhona ama-director akhona ama-producer akhona ama-in nikani labantu umsebenzi ukuthi bakhulume nama-tech company kufundise intsha isebenzi ye phambili sikhathele ukuma.
We also thought that there should be an intervention at the level at school subjects in which the history of tech needs to be taught, as well as modern tech and code writing. And students should be allowed to experience AR, AI, 3D, and in order for them to be able to jump into innovation.
Okulandelayo bakwethu, there needs to be change in the way content is commissioned. Ngoba ngalendlela i-content bayicommissiona ngakhona, it's poor. Asizange uzothenga ubuso bomuntu, sizontshela amaqiniso uma ungalithandi umnyango uvulekile ungaphuma kodwa ngokuxoshi. Ebese mangiqhubeka to change the way they commission content with multiple screens in mind. Large youthful audiences, because we don't have an audience, and the reason why we don't have an audience is because we don't have stories that talk to us as young people. Small example, when I came yesterday ngivunulile la nabanye bebangibuka ngathi uyagula lo uyempini, that is content. Ayikho content edlula leyo. Futhi masithi we are telling South African stories, not African stories nje ububabsi bekasho athi umuntu I'm going to Africa. This is also Africa. And if we tell South African stories and remember ukuthi they are also part of African stories, then ngeke isilahlekele. Kodwa ngiqhubeka. Okunye kufuna singakhohlwa is the increased competition in the way we tell stories. Ngoba phela competition ibalekile ngale kwe competition then asizokwazi ukuthi ubani ohamba phambili noma ubani obhedayo futhi ngeke size silungisa ngawo amaphutha futhi silungisa ngokulungisa amaphutha so masingawalungisa amaphutha then ngesikhathi sethu sidlala ngaso.
And to allow for a lot of youth to participate in this, we need to put, a previous group also said that we need to have an innovation fund. And that within that innovation fund, that thought needs to be put into the categories of the formats that we're funding. In other words, we need to be funding, like the NFF funding, needs to be funding web series, they need to be funding AR, so we really need to change the categories of funding.
Okay. Mase ngiqhubeka bakwethu okunye babu minister sicelayo sicela ukuthi nisisize nge-mentorship njengabazali bethu. Already umama Siphatha uqalile uyasifundisa njengengane zakhe ngoba ufuna ukuthi esifake kuwona uline noma igiyeli kahle singathi siyaphambili kanti shayo reverse futhi nangu nomama Fildoza silwe saze sazwana nangu futhi nomama Phethi naye omunye futhi okwabantu abasimentorayo njengentsha. We need more people who are going to mentor the youth, because without mentorship then ngeke kuyafana nokuthi thina siyazihola masizihola sizoshayisa bese sibuye sikhonjwe yini abazali bethu nethi babethi bayenzani kanti nini enishiye umsebenzi wenu nangawenza. Ngiqhubeka futhi baba minister. Yeah. Okay, uthubabsi ngiqale phansi. Kuleli lizwe lakithi sinenkinga yokuthi ama-mentor sinawo. Ngo George. In this country of mine, we have a huge problem where as young people we do not have enough mentors that will mentor young people into the right direction. That is why the youth is doing all these bad things and is always finding itself in trouble. The reason why we have this high volume of young people using substances like nyaupe, becoming omalumes, is because we do not have mentors in this country. But thankfully enough, we've got Mam Sipati over there, we've got my mom Upeting Apa, we've got Mam Fidoza, but it's still not enough. We still need more of our elders mentoring young people and pushing them to the right direction, because not as future leaders, as the current leaders of this country, Tina, as young people, we need to be led by people who will teach us how to lead this country and lead the future into the right direction.
Well done. This is like unequal access to the internet.
Oh, Babu Minister, ngobuyela futhi kwelakithi ningixolele bakwethu content njalo le. Zolo lokhu bengikhuluma nomama Mphethe sikuyo i-disruption and innovation. Ubeka ngithumela ama slide kwayenza ukuthi anginayo airtime. Ngase ngithi Mama Mphethe ngithengele i-airtime ngoba ngenayo. And ukungabi ne-airtime kusivalela amathuba kwenza ukuthi kungabi ne-access ye-information. And if we do not have access of information, then you won't even have access to content. So into esiyicelayo Babu Minister ukuthi unequal access to the internet and data, which is expensive. La eMzansi sicela ukuthi nenzeni iplani nomongameli nawo wonke ama-minister nizama ukuthi nikhiphe imali ezikhwameni zenu nisithengele i-data ukuthi sizokwazi ukuthi sisebenze. Is it me?
No, it's me now. We also needed, the point was made previously, but it's about getting our products out in the market, and one of them is about cinemas in all local areas, and that exhibition needs to be a priority.
Okay, okay.
Dual essay.
Oh, okay. Innovation funds needs to assist marketing division to innovate transmedia links platform. Sicela ukuthi baba usivulele isikhwama ukuthi sikwazi ukuthi siuvule lo mkhakha wethu. Yabona masinga investor kakhulu ku what's this? Kakhulukazi umsebenzi wethu kuze abantu babe ne-access kufuna so market. And if we do not use market as innovation, then sisasalele move. So sicela ukuthi nakho lokho nokufakela izibuko njobe ezinye izinto nezifakela izibuko kahle.
So one of the important things, we also thought that we should pressure DTI to make sure that they're facilitating trade visits to innovative markets. So not just film festivals, but film festivals that include YouTube channels and a lot of other digital footage, rather than us going to the same film festivals everywhere. So we need a sort of innovative look at festivals around the world, and perhaps South Africa should actually host one of these.
Sekuselenje kancane bakuthi sizoyivala. Baba babsi okunye sicela ukuthi ama province akwazi ukukhuluma ewodwa. As filmmakers, it's a challenge ukuthi if this production ifuna ukuyosebenza kwenye province kuba inkinga ngenxa ukuthi ama province don't have an intergovernmental relationship where they communicate. It shouldn't be a role of a filmmaker to go and communicate ama permit to go and shoot in another province, while least we've got GFC or NFVF. One of these people, they should be doing their work. Kodwa kubalekile, it becomes a problem, especially for young people when they need to do production. Kube ukuthi babafuna imali kodwa imali abanayo. So sicela ukuthi nalena ifakele izibuko uGFC no NFVF bahlale phansi babonisana ukuthi kuzoyiwa kanjani phambili.
And one of the a very good point was made that we really need to fund AI in developing language accessibility, so live subtitles, etc. So funding needs to be put towards encouraging many languages to be able to read the same programming.
Sengiyivala Cash. Oh, awaqedi ma.
No, carry on.
Oh, sengiyivala babs. Njengentsha sicela imali ukuthi njengentsha siphume kule lizwe sihambe siye kwamanye ama-country to infiltrate yonke le information about filmmaking sibuye sibuyise ulwazi la ekhaya. The Chinese and the Japanese, they did it. They took their own group of people and took them to China to go to America to go and buy scraps of cars, and then they brought them back to China. While the Americans were laughing, saying, "Guti, bayenzani labantu bathenga imoto eyifile." But with those cars, noma lezo ikrephu zeimoto igedlemba, babuya baqala phansi bakhanda imoto ezintsha. So ngiyacela babsi ngenhlonipho khehle. Nani bazali bethu, asicela ubaba kuphela, sicela nani ngoba nonke ningabazali bethu. We are asking that there is a budget for young people to travel, not to film festivals only, but to travel anywhere where there is film, anything which is film related. And futhi sihambe siyosebenza nakhona. Amashayina babintu babayenza, they would take a doctor ahamba yosebenza as a cleaner enesa, not because bebashota ngemsebenzi, but they wanted to infiltrate the information that these people they were using, and they would bring it back home. So nathi ma ukuthi funa nisenza ama cleaner kwamanye amazwe ukuthi sibuye nolwazi sikhulisa industry yethu kwenzeni lokho baba, isicelo sethu leso.
And finally, I just want to say to our group, thank you so much for all your thoughts, and we hope that we've captured them. I know that we haven't given substance to some of them, but please stand up and bring your intelligence to the front in the session when we're doing Q&A. And also there was an insistence in our group that we all go into smaller groups to really interrogate these issues further. Thank you.
Siyabonga.
Just to make you aware that you must please smile. You are already live on SABC digital platform. So please show your best foot forward. Group 4.
Oh, I'm on TV. Mummy, hello. Yeah, ours was Show You the Money Commission. Show Me the Money Commission. What was the formal title? Funding and Resourcing for Growth. Okay, so all protocol observed and all of that stuff. The last presentation took a long time. I'll try and keep ours as short as we can. It's a highlights, headline presentation more than anything else. Just to say, I do speak fast and I do speak with an accent. And that's because, like Katiwe, we sound like English white people here, but we grew up in exile. And that means, you know, English people don't speak English, really. Unlike Jack, a homegrown South African who presented beautifully here. I didn't hear that, but let's move on. The first question: what is the SWOT analysis? Strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats. Analysis around the government funding streams available to filmmakers. The weaknesses, we identify, or the strengths, sorry, we have government support. And if you total it all up, it's pretty significant, substantial. If it was used as well as it could be, certainly. And that speaks to the weaknesses, that many of our homegrown funders are not aligned. We've been calling for alignment for some time, and that means, you know, in the SABC are aligned with the DTI, the importance of owning our own intellectual property. Unless you do that, you're not certainly qualify for DTI rebate money. there are a host of commissions and so on around the country now, organizations, foundations. We finally have the South African Audio Visual Forum, is that right? Yeah. And we have high hopes, but there's not enough variety, diversity in the funding models that are available. At present, you know, unless you can get a broadcaster or NFVF and the DTI, you're in a hiding to nowhere. It's very limited. The financial puzzle is very basic, and we need to make it much more complex. So you have different funds for different things and so on, and even rebates in some of the provinces, much like models elsewhere in the world, in particular Canada. There's not enough funds generally available. There's co-productions need to happen without going through the treaty system. Many countries we simply don't have treaties with, and making those treaties work sometimes are just impossible. So we need to get away from the limitations of the bureaucratic regulations that are often unnecessarily imposed on us. There is insufficient private investment. It's very small and limited to a couple of mechanisms, and I'll come back to that. It's a real weakness that many of our stakeholders do not share values. They are not shared values when it comes to how we are going to build and grow this industry. That is clear. The opportunities, we think there's huge potential to reignite growth. We are in a stagnant position. We need now more than ever to start taking heed of many of the suggestions that have come up over the last decade, because without these interventions, our industry is going to move from stagnation into very real recession, and we're going to see more blood on the floor, and we're going to lose much of the ground that we have made over the last 10, 15 years in terms of diversifying this industry, making it more representative of the country's demographics. Now we know that film and television has a massive social and economic multiplier effect. The Minister himself spoke to that. We need synergy amongst these government entities that now come under this new forum, audiovisual forum. And we believe if it does really do its work, it can provide the much needed growth that this structure needs to formally support. There's forthcoming legislation, and many of us have battled for years around it, whether it's the Performance Protection Act or the Copyright Amendment Bill. We salute our government for passing this. We have been fighting this fight for many years to own our own intellectual property. The review has gone on in the DTI for 12 years. The DTI has stood firm in the face of a lot of pressure from the Motion Pictures Association and the collecting agencies and the middlemen and so on, and we support them. We salute them. And there's my English mate heckling me from behind. I nearly had a fight with one of their presenters in Commission 1 today, fisticuffs over the presentation. We need to get this in place so we can get the sort of regime we need at the SABC in place, so we can, move away from the commission model, move away from the slavery model. Now, the threats. We've had 10 years of economic recession. We know that. It's a worldwide phenomenon. We think a threat is film losing its special status, and the white paper and what it's recommending in terms of the merger between the NFVF and the NAC is, in effect, losing film's special status. We do believe that this needs to remain part of AGISA, the accelerated, those industries which have room for accelerated growth. The dominance of the Hollywood system which owns and controls the means to get to our consumer touch points, render our market uncompetitive and inaccessible to local filmmakers, affecting our distribution potential and therefore access to funding. We had big discussion. Our commission was in many ways dominated around the gaps in development financing, development funding, development support, business support, and distribution. Some of the questions of what were the concrete examples of key learning. Success stories about private financing investment. Well, I've just spoken to that. I mean, the problem is the only thing that's really working is the C12O and C12J, and we're recommending that these two be properly supported, properly understood by our various funding agencies and so on, and potentially merged. We're getting private money in there. Why aren't they coming in? Why aren't we getting significant private investment in our industry? Well, essentially, there are very little returns on investments. The only people at the business end of this industry anymore, given the declining budgets in TV and so on, maybe a few of the soapy production houses, but we know it's the service sector. Huge chunks of the DTI money going there, and it's the distributors, it's the cinema chains. Everything else is simply not good enough business for business sake. So we're looking for the reintroduction that the NFEF pioneered and did very successfully of emerging producer training, advanced producer training, the Sadiba project and so on. There's a whole cohort of people who've come into our industry who we're not speaking the same language with because they haven't had the sort of training that's required to understand a very fast-changing environment. We're looking for business, a balancing between support of businesses and so it's not only the projects that are supported, because unless you've got a viable business, unless you've got a business that's fit for purpose, you're not going to survive in this industry. It needs to be lean, mean, and you've got to know a whole load of economic, financial, and legal stuff to be able to survive. We believe talent needs to be identified and tracked, especially those who have introduced innovative entrepreneurial solutions, and they will be amongst first in terms of deserving support. So this support needs to be industry-led. You don't get this sort of training at university. It's absolutely practical. They're not going to tell you what is a synopsis, what is a teaser, how to make a trailer, how to write a proper financing plan, how to understand your revenue cascades, how to forecast, and so on and so forth. These things are very specific skills that you need, we need to sell our projects. If we make progress on all of the above, we believe it will encourage investor support. But we've all got to be singing from the same hymn sheet. What is South Africa getting right, and what needs improvement to attract investment? Sorry, that's what we've just spoken about. So we're not trying to answer that question again here. What do we need to encourage investment? Minister, we need a champion for this film sector, for arts and culture. And we need, 5 years ago, 6 years ago, maybe more, our budget was increased by just under 100 million. We are asking for a budget of 250 million. But something we're not going to get wrong this time. We are going to hold that leadership to account. We are going to put your fire to the feet when it comes to the spend. What proportion of that spend goes to this industry is determined by the Act. And we want the Act to be abided by. Comrade Phil, Comrade Shadrach, we're not joking about this one. We're very serious. We have to adhere to the regulations of the legislation. And so we want 65% of that to go to production and development, and 10% to the other items. Now we're talking about a 250 million budget. And we've come to an end of having councils where there's no industry professionals. We've come to an end where we've got people there who don't understand our industry and our plight and so on. We have to make these interventions appropriate, and the only way we can do it is by putting our own people inside these bodies. Now, oh God, what have I done? Gone to the top. All funds need to be ring-fenced for transformation. Whatever fund we're promoting here, I'll say it once. We want a portion of that fund ring-fenced for the youth. We want a portion of that fund ring-fenced for the women. And we need complete transparency. It's not enough to tell us your proposal was rejected. How do people learn why their proposal was rejected if they don't give you the reasons? We need proper research on what's available, what's been given, what's succeeded, how many development proposals lead to production, what is the money generated from that project once it's completed production, where is it screened and so on. Unless we can track these things, how can we report to government about our successes? How can we sustain the levels of funding? Unless we can give the real hard concrete figures to Treasury and all those bean counters there who don't really care about culture and are really just Philistines. By 2025, all funds and allocations need to represent the demographics of this country. It's a six-year plan. And the only thing I've got in common with Comrade Stalin is I believe in these 6-year plans and 5-year plans or whatever. Let's get there. Let's get there. Let's get to the position in 5 years' time we can say 50% of our producers are females, 50% of our directors are females, 50% of our production companies are female-led. Yeah? And how many? And the same for the youth. And the same for the youth. What's your democratic? 25% of the population. That's all we're giving you. Tourism. The tourism levy. They've done well. Tourism in South Africa, they've done well. They've done their job. Let us help them do it better. We want the tourism levy. They're third biggest industry in the country. No, seriously, we want a slice of that tourism. It's been proven that film and tourism, there's an integral symbiosis, inextricable link. I'll try and use a bigger word, but I can't remember it. All major telecoms need to be levied on data provided for a fund for short-term content. There's a massive demand there for short-term content. We're not producing enough of it. And we believe this can create a win-win situation. We know there's a levy on the telecoms at the moment, and it goes to the Universal Service Access Fund, and we want 3 to 5% of that fund ring-fenced for film. We need to look at the Brazilian examples in this regard, and they need to be explored further by SARS. We know SARS, Treasury, you don't do these things right, you get blocked. We want to strengthen this new forum, the South African Audiovisual Forum. We want to see quarterly meetings happening. We want these meetings monitored and evaluated, and we want these mandates of these various departments aligned. And we've got to appoint a champion, not only to drive that process, but the process and the statement and the declaration that we come out of here. We've got to appoint the right sort of person who knows government, but is a bulldog. As we come to a close, we asked the DAC to make a budgeting submission to ring fence for next year's, this coming year's, financial year's money, so we can meet again and that we can go through everything that we've agreed to in our commissions. So we don't just make platitudes to accountability and so on. We follow through and we do our work and we live up to our commitments. They say the cheapest thing in the world is to make promises which you can't deliver. We want to make sure that the promises that we come out with today, or the promise of this summit, is delivered. And we cannot deliver on that promise unless the cinemas in the townships that we've been speaking about for over a decade, that Brazil showed us how to do. You know, there's a saying, if you can't win your own country, if you can't win your own market, how do you think you're going to win anything internationally? And that's why we're behind Nollywood and all the other woods. We need a hood of film gangsters. So we want to support these township cinema initiatives. We've asked them to come together to lobby and to make this real. We knew there was a project in line at the NFVF one stage. It didn't go anywhere. We thought that would be the beginning. The only people who have township cinemas at the moment are the churches. And the only films that you get to see are the ones they decide are good for your soul. Hallelujah, Jehovah. Existing cinemas need the carrot and stick approach. We've got to introduce and put some fire under these people's feet again. Quotas for local content. It's you know, if they're not going to play ball with us with the distribution game and ensuring our cinemas stay there longer, and they come in on, you know, we get tax breaks or something for local films, some levy on international films. If they're not going to play with us, Minister, we've got to fight them. We've got to put the boxing gloves on now. We're in a tight corner. Thank you, everybody.
Afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, all protocol observed. I'm going to be giving the recommendations for Commission 5. We'd just like to thank the Minister for convening the summit, as well as the reference group for all, I mean, it was a good 2 months of work in preparation for this, so thank you to the reference group. And then I'd personally like to thank Commission 5 for the robust but diplomatic discussions, which made it possible for us to get to our recommendations in good time. We actually finished a good 5 minutes early because everybody was so well behaved. So thank you to my commission. We were dealing with empowerment, inclusivity, and capacity building. So I'll address our recommendations as per the questions in the booklet. The first question was, how is the independent contractor-employee dichotomy to be addressed? Do freelancers want the protections offered to employees, and what is the trade-off? So I'll preface this by mentioning that by 2030, 65%, this is a UN study, 65% of work will be atypical work. So this means that 65% of all work will be essentially independent contracting, freelance work, and this is in 2030. That's not too far from now. So when we're discussing this dichotomy of independent contractors and employees, yes, we're discussing it for our industry, but this in 2030 will be 65% of the population. So it doesn't only apply to our industry. So currently, freelancers are out of status because we don't fall under the protections of employees according to our labor laws. So as a commission, we recommended that there be a bargaining forum that is created, particularly in our industry, to essentially bargain for these rights and protections that we are not enjoying at the moment as freelancers. This body would be funded and supported by government, particularly the Department of Labor, as this is their area, and the Department of Arts and Culture, as we fall under this department. What would this body be doing? The first thing would be bargaining bargaining around the issues of ensuring that the protective rights that are afforded to us under the labor laws are actually enjoyed by freelancers. So currently, because of the legislature, I'll give an example. The National Minimum Wage Commission has been put to effect by the 1st of January. They're working on a new minimum wage across the country, which will include all people who are employees. Unfortunately, this minimum wage will not affect freelancers because we are not technically employees. So this bargaining forum that we're speaking to will then be able to engage when situations like this happen and say, here's a crack, here's a gap, freelancers are not covered in this, so can you essentially put this in for us? So that is what the bargaining forum will essentially do. The major thing is that currently the status in terms of law is that we want to enjoy the same protective rights that employees have. However, the trade-off that is discussed in this question is that we, as freelancers, do not want to be considered as employees. Why? What is the negative side to this? The essential negative thing is that we would then lose our right to a copyright because as employees, you essentially don't have a right to copyright. That's the first thing. The second thing is we would lose our status in terms of the tax. We would then be taxed as full employees, yet we are not full employees. None of us actually work a full-time job and have those rights and protections. So it's really important that we have a bargaining forum that is speaking for us and explaining the intricacies of how our industry works in order to show that, to ensure that we are protected, but also we are not then just lumped with employees and then now tax is different, copyright is a problem. So a bargaining forum is really important to deal with these issues. The other thing that the bargaining forum needs to do is standardize contracts in our industry. This was brought up as a real issue, which then also speaks to working conditions because there are no standards in our industry. Anything goes. I can print something from the internet and that's the contract. So a bargaining forum would then help to standardize contracts and make sure that there's fair play. This would speak to a dispute resolution mechanism, again, within this bargaining forum, because currently, yes, I printed my contract from the internet and you signed it, and then we disagree, and that's where it ends, because how do you take it up? We are not covered by the CCMA because we are not employees. And so I think so many issues happen in our industry because there's no regulation, there's no standardization of contracts, there's no real engagement and no way to go to if there are issues. So essentially this bargaining forum needs to also work as a dispute resolution mechanism. The bargaining forum also needs to explore and implement solutions around medical aid for freelancers. I don't know who's got medical aid and how you have it if you're a freelancer. I mean, social security, issues of social security. If you are unemployed, you don't have access. I mean, if you're out of a job, you see, that's the problem. I even say unemployed. If you're out of a job, if you're not on a contract, there's nothing to, balance up in the meantime because we're not employees. I don't know if anyone's ever really gotten a loan from a financial institution as a freelancer with your paperwork. I think these are all the issues that across the industry we can all agree need to be addressed, and it's just that we've been moving forward and trying to make it happen because that's what we do as freelancers, but someone needs to be actively addressing this so that it's not each man for himself trying to figure out how they are going to get this loan, how they're going to get medical aid, how they're going to access social security. So this is what this bargaining forum would be for. A major thing that came up in our commission was that this bargaining forum must address the gender and race pay gap. In 2019, I mean, gender is, I mean, to just even begin to understand the huge gaps between a male and a female, as well as between blacks and whites in terms of the pay gap. This needs to be addressed, and we believe that this bargaining forum should be the one to address this. Finally, the bargaining forum should address working conditions, which then speaks to our next question, which is what needs to be done to provide better working conditions and a safe work environment set in a country with the highest levels of gender-based violence against women in the world. So, I mean, I think I speak on behalf of all women when I say we are tired of the issues of sexual harassment. Everybody mentions it as a footnote, and everyone says, yes, Me Too is great, and yes, we must stop it, but there needs to be real implementation in terms of what's happening for women. So as women, the main things that we need dealt with in terms of the working conditions, which, again, I'd like to preface this by saying that currently South Africa has one of the highest rates of gender-based violence, and we're equal, if not above, a lot of countries that are actually at war right now. That's how bad the violence against women is. So it's not a small issue. It's not something that can be sidelined. It's something that is being experienced to such extremity that it has to be dealt with urgently. So for women, what is currently in place and what we recommend is that there has been some work done. There has been a code of conduct that's been put together. What needs to happen, this was put together by an organization called Swift Sisters Working in Film and Television, who've done a lot of work and done the research, who've done the background work as to what needs to happen. So the recommendations are a code of conduct that must be a prerequisite for funding. So all funders must be able to sign this code of conduct, and essentially, as the woman who spoke yesterday from the DTI, you can't be funding people who are harming women. So it should be a prerequisite for you to get funding that you have this code of conduct. Secondly, the second recommendation is the concept of the safety officer. This has been presented to a number of government entities, including the DAC already, and we've been working with the DTI, but basically across the board, a safety officer concept is essentially to have someone on set who is trained, and the research needs to be done around what exactly they are trained in, whether it's HR, legal, counseling, support, etc., but someone who's physically on set, a physical presence, and who maybe isn't there the whole time, but essentially is available, they're on the call sheet, but they're there to deal with these issues. So a safety officer on each set, this has already started. This research was done 2 years ago, and across Europe, they've already started, they've overtaken us as South Africa, even though we had this first, because there hasn't been enough support to put this in place. This is what everyone is doing. They're putting safety officers on set to ensure that the working environment is conducive for everyone, not just women, but anyone who's vulnerable on set, anyone who experiences any sort of discrimination. This can include race discrimination. There has to be someone on set also dealing with just bodily safety. You know, when people are doing stunts, people are dying, and there's no one actually dealing with it. It's just, oh, sorry, because, oh, the production actually didn't have insurance for that, so we're really sorry. So essentially a safety officer who will be on there. Primarily there is a framework that exists, which is what Swift has come up with. So a safety officer on all sets, and this should also be a prerequisite for funding. On working conditions, one of the major things that also came up was people living with disabilities. I recently heard a story of a young woman who really wanted to study drama, and she was a dancer, etc., at the University of Cape Town. and she was unable to take this course purely because most of the classes happen on the first floor and there's no lift to the first floor. And so she just couldn't take the class. These are the basic things, the practical things that need to be included. And this is just from, that's a barrier to entry from just studying. What more on-sets, what facilities are available for disabled people to actually be able to, you know, express themselves and also have their crafts seen. So accessibility to sets and basically access to things that all able-bodied people have. And also access to assisted devices that assist them to do things that able-bodied people do without, you know, having to have a device assisting them. On working conditions, the major thing that we also recommend is that there are a lot of industry bodies that are already doing the work for women, for disabled people, that are doing work around freelancers, that are working for the editors, that are working for the writers, for all these freelancers. There are existing bodies that are doing this work already. And so what our strong recommendation is that you capacitate these organizations. They can't continue to do it on a volunteer basis. They need to be able to be funded so that they're able to actually effectively do what they're supposed to be doing, what they're already doing on a volunteer basis. And that's a recommendation that came up time and again, that there needs to be funding for the existing bodies who are doing the work on a voluntary basis, and it can't continue like that because then it's actually not effective. The third question that we responded to, what interventions must be in place to ensure the local audiovisual industry works for young people from an employment, training, and development perspective? We took a lot of time on this because we think it is very vital and important. And the first thing that we had put forward to you, Minister Mthethwa, is for you to speak to the Minister of Higher Education to correct the way that it has been structured currently, the training structures. We do not have proper training structures that are tailored to our industry at the moment. There's just very generic ones. There's essentially the AFTAs and the university institutions, and then there's a huge gap in between that does not actually address those who are unable to access these expensive facilities. And in between there are the SETAs who are doing some work. So what we as a commission have recommended is that, for example, the CATH-SETA funding, which already comes from levies, must be directed to our industry to improve the industry readiness of the people who are entering into the industry. So these are people who may not have had a chance to go to AFTA or to a university, but that there should be tailor-made programs that are making these young people industry ready. And secondly, that the TVET colleges be centers of specialization, that it can't be a generic, because the problem is that they're very generic, like film school and producing and editing, but there's no one who's speaking specifically to what a gaffer is and how to train them on that, who's speaking to what it is to what is a boom, etc., etc. Basically, we need centers of specialization, and that can be put through the TVET colleges that are already existing. We also came up with a recommendation that we need access to the national lottery funds that exist. These are the things that can be funneled. These are the funds that can be funneled into upskilling the young people so that they are able to get into the industry and able to have the correct skills that will let them be employed and not be perpetual trainees, perpetual interns, etc., because that's currently the status, because they don't have the skills. They aren't able to acquire the skills for them to improve themselves. This was touched on by a number of the other commissions, so I won't go into it, but a levy on data, which goes into basically training the youth on how to create content that's specialized for these platforms, the MTNs. There's so many platforms opening up, and a levy on those data can actually train the young people so that they're able to create this content and essentially to pay them to create this content. So I won't touch too much on that. A major thing which has also been touched on was, this is for the youth to have access. is to cut the red tape. It was agreed generally that from someone who's new and coming into the industry to someone who's been in the industry for 20 years, you know, resources, applications, policies, incentives are a nightmare. People don't know how to access them. People struggle, even if they've been 20 years in the industry, to access these incentives that exist. And so there's so much red tape and there's just so much bureaucracy around it that the red tape needs to be cut so that people can actually access the funds, the resources that are being promised to them. So that was a major recommendation. There was a recommendation that we increase on-site learnerships as well as bursaries. And again, that there are systems that are existing already, and these must be essentially collated and given to the people to understand. For example, there's the DTI Strategic Partnership Program, which deals with how to actually make young people ready for the industry. But access to this strategic partnership program and the know-how to get involved in these programs is very limited. So essentially to the existing things that are working for them to be funded. Again, for the youth and people who are marginalized, there was a major call for the rural and township communities to be integrated and not left behind in terms of all of these incentives that happen. Everything is happening in Joburg, in Gauteng, you know, everything is happening here, and rural communities as well as township communities are being left behind. And that actually speaks to our fourth question. Well, it speaks to our fifth question, so I will get there. The fourth question was, what interventions must be in place to ensure that... No. I've actually responded to that. So the next question is, are we preparing our children for the future so that they can participate in the fourth industrial revolution? This was a really great time in our session when we were discussing this, because it was a time of excitement and, you know, there was a lot of nervous energy, but everyone is very excited about this fourth industrial revolution and how we can come about with solutions. One of the solutions and recommendations that was put forward has been spoken by the other commissions. It's an innovation fund which deals with innovation. But what we came up with as well is a fact-finding commission. I think it's essential that there be some research. We can't just implement things that we actually don't know. So a commission that is set up to find out what is actually happening. This is a lot of people have heard about the fourth industrial revolution for the first time at the summit. What is the fourth industrial revolution and what do we need to be prepared for it? So a fact-finding commission that is commissioned specifically to outline what we need to do, what's happening, what we need to do to be prepared for the future. And this should happen simultaneously with us gearing up our training. What we spoke about with training was that we touched on the fact that from a young age, the training needs to begin from a young age. There's a lot of, a couple of women were pointing out that at private schools right now, their children are being taught coding. That's not happening in public schools. That's not happening in the rural areas, and I don't think anyone's even started to think about that. And that is a way that people get marginalized again, because there'll be a tiny minority who know how to code, et cetera, and they'll continue to have that monopoly, and the rest will be marginalized and won't be able to catch up. So that's a priority. So when we're speaking to the practicals of this training, we said that we recommend that there be training on the existing training, but also training on what the future is going to look like. Because there's all this automatic robotics, et cetera, you know, we're being told that machines will be doing this, et cetera. So how do we train people to be able to, where do you fit in? You know what I mean? To explain to people where they will fit in and train them in that, as opposed to training them in things that are redundant. So that was a major thing, to make sure we start training people, and this will come from the fact-finding commission. We also said as a recommendation that this training not be centralized, but maybe also be put online, so that people far and wide have access to it. One of the recommendations that came forward, or bits of information, is that currently there's an IBM Innovation Hub, which is free for people to get on. You can learn how to code, how to build an app, etc., etc. People don't have this information. So if we can put this information out online, as well as creating whatever we then find from our fact-finding commission, this would be great. But online would be great so that it's got a wider reach. It's not that you have to come to NFVF or Gauteng or to a specific place to get this information. It should be available to all. Finally, on to the last question. How do we promote ownership and equity for women, in particular black women in the media and film industry? So with this question, one of the major things that came forward, not so much as a recommendation, but as a statement, is that we can't simply throw funds at women's initiatives that exist and say we are funding women and empowering them. You know, there's slates, there's X, Y, and Z, and the answer is not to just continue throwing more and more money at these slates. There has to be an interrogation and investigation if these things are actually working and achieving what they've set out to do. Because a lot of the time there's money thrown at it and maybe even a bigger budget thrown at it and absolutely the same results, which are usually no results. So there has to be an interrogation first of the existing structures, and essentially they have to be fixed. Those structures need to be fixed before we start creating new ones. But on that, there was a clear recommendation that there needs to be capital and capacity given to women. On this, there's an international drive across the world that says 50-50 by 2020. 50-50 funding for women by 2020. And this is something that shouldn't be too difficult for us in South Africa, as 52% of the population are women. Yes, that does deserve a round of applause. And so in terms of capital and capacity for women, we say, again, fund existing successes. There doesn't need to be a new organization or a new entity that's going to do this. Fund the ones that are already doing it successfully. But then also to capacitate new, and there was a specific drive on new women companies where you can use existing females who are running companies well, capacitate them and help them to capacitate others. There was a major recommendation that there needs to be the teaching of the business of film. So instead of just throwing more funding at women, teach the business of the film. So an example was given that, for example, there are people buying formats and producing them. I don't know if there's any women who have the capacity to spend these millions and go overseas and buy these formats and produce them, et cetera, et cetera. That's sort of been marginalized to a very specific group of people, and that's what women want access to. So when we say the business of film, we don't want to just be doing specific roles. We want to be included in the entire value chain. The second recommendation was for government to fund acquisition of existing companies. So there was a call that there's a lot of legislature around 51% where there's tick boxes for women, especially women of color, to be included. But how is someone going to have access to 20 million to buy into an existing company? There is no, there's very few women who have the capacity to do that. And if they do, they might as well just start their own. So there needs to be a funding model that assists women to buy into existing companies. And then finally, to address and prioritize black women. The question speaks to prioritizing black women, and what was the clear consensus in our session was that yes, the door has been opened for women of color, it has been opened for them, but they really don't have a seat at the table still. So there needs to be that prioritization and that tailoring to speaking to exactly what the needs are for a black woman, because currently, as black women, we are at the bottom of the food chain, and it's very hard to get up. So there needs to be that prioritization and a very specific invite for women of color to be involved in the bigger business that's happening around the industry. And so just to summarize the major things that our commission had was that we need to fund things that are already successful. There's so much happening on a volunteer basis it's not viable, it's not sustainable for it to continue like that. There needs to be people who, the government needs to support the existing successes. There was a gentleman who spoke about, he's been teaching young people to prepare for the fourth industrial revolution for the last 3 years. He's in the Northwest, he's got a little school that he's been running. He's put through 200 people. He has absolutely no access to funding and has tried, but those are success stories that need to be funded. There's organizations doing the work already for all the different guilds, the different organizations, they're doing the work, and so they need to be funded. We also agreed that we need to monitor existing structures. Like we said, we can't just throw more money at things that aren't working. They need to be assessed and held accountable for what they're supposed to be doing. And we completely agree with your recommendation, Minister, for this to be an annual thing so that we can actually assess and address where we are in terms of I lost my train of thought, but in terms of where we are as an industry. And yes, those are the major recommendations from us at Commission 5. Thank you so much.
Yeah, Dynamax come in small packages, eh? Even yesterday when she was facilitating there, you could hear in that commission that there was a no-nonsense approach. Yeah, when she says, your time is up, your time is up. So I was practicing the same with her now to say, time is up, time is up. We have listened to a number of recommendations. But the purpose of being here ultimately is to have an implementation plan instead of questions. And because of time, just to alert you that you are now on live real 404. So they always operate on time. And I think we will need to have the minister's closing covered. So just if there are any significant recommendations that will take this film industry of South Africa to the highest trajectory that we want, tell our own story, our own way, create our own Sollywood. Do you have any critical thing that you think the commissions missed before we take the minister onto the podium? Minister, please come forth. And now the hands are so many. There is a side I didn't take there, because this side was ignored. So one.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Who is having the mic?
Yeah. This is what I also mentioned on the very same commission that just finished talking now. That Ubaba Mthethwa, if bakhona a program for the young emerging filmmakers, which is guaranteed 100% job at the end. How are we going to achieve that? We are looking at the SABC. They have this SABC ENCO, which is not working for us. There can be another channel that can actually train young people how to broadcast. A period of 1 year, already at the end of the year, or they're starting to work on that channel. And it becomes a channel that will have new content, because local content is key. That will actually even stop us to be so radical and try to fight the SABC asking for the 90% local content and the likes. And that is why today, singama siyiboshwa. Naye umthetho njengobadela paphambili. Siboshwe naye. I'm one of the person oboshiwe. When we were picketing that global conference, that global citizen festival, which was happening at the stadium, we were outside there at the entrance of the VIP, saying if it's for South Africa, it's for us. And we were saying if it's for Mandela, it's for us. We cannot take money to America anymore. And I so wished if Mtsipe was here so that we are able to simchele on the eyes that Mzipe, you cannot take our money to America. Whereas there are emerging filmmakers, emerging artists here, musicians and everything. So yeah, that is my take. And thank you very much. And we'll continue being radical if there are no change. Thank you.
Yes, I need also, I need to mix males, females, and I close because as I said that we need to be covered. So I'm only taking 3. All others will have an opportunity to submit your comments in writing. Okay. No, I didn't recognize, I didn't recognize anyone at this stage. No. Okay, can I take a female first? No, guys. A male has spoken. Can I take a female? Please.
Thank you, Chair, for recognizing. And also this, I'm also just want to touch on the issue of gender, and well done to all the commissioners, especially
Please,
the last one.
please stand.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Especially the
Your
last
name?
commission. My name is Juliet. I'm from a production company called Gemma Productions. As much as it's important that we do the 50-50 by 2020, and also including the areas of funding, but it's critical that we put women who also believe in the empowerment of other women, because it's easy to put Juliet who will perpetuate the stereotypes of making the director a man, making the producer, the executive producer a man. So therefore, we need to train and empower other women as women. And the men who are in our industry, we don't want the problems that we're seeing in the US that led to the Me Too movement, is that we need to stop portraying women as, I call it triple V. The only images you see of women are those who are vulnerable, widows, triple V, vulnerable, victims, and valueless. And those are the type of images we tend to see in our media background. So even if you're there as a man, you need to be conscientious of how you portray your fellow sisters and your women in general. And there's a need for the arts to collaborate. It's easy to buy music without actually thinking that you could use an artist that can promote your film. We know that Celine Dion made Titanic. We know that Lion King was made by music. So we need to explore opportunities to collaborate with the music and the theater as an industry.
Okay, you can give the gentleman. Romeo, unfortunately, is the last one, because we need to give Minister the chance.
Thanks,
now
Chair.
to talk.
My name is Pimelo Siditi, Chair.
Proceed.
I'm serving as the Secretary General of the Cultural and Creative Industries Federation of South Africa. What I could not hear clearly spelled out in, especially the Policy Commission, was the transformation agenda. It's not clearly spelled out. We shouldn't be afraid. This is 25 years in our democracy, but I think we still are afraid to tackle the issue of transformation agenda, in a sense that we do not see a clear regulatory framework that has to govern the issues of transformation. There have been targets, there have been quotas, for instance. I normally make example with SASCOC, through the Ministry of Sport, that SASCOC is the vehicle that is being used to transform sport, in as far as sport is concerned with that ministry. And in that instance, it then suggests that the audiovisual sector, as it is, it's got two phases. It's got one which is developmental, and it's got one which is established. And the established aspect of it is the one that's monopolizing the audiovisual sector, the industries. So it needs a regulatory framework, which needs a regulatory body. So in this instance, Commission 2 could have said, we need to see a body that does the regulation. And we are in a perfect position as a Cultural and Creative Industries Federation of South Africa to be that regulatory body. And it can only happen if we reach a level that it goes to Parliament as an act of Parliament. in the same vein that SASCOC became an act of parliament for it to be established to transform and regulate the industry. And in addition, we still in Kofinvaba or who's in Kahung village, who sees films be made in Mzansi Magic or whatever channel, and that person does not get opportunity. So sector development also falls into that category of regulatory framework. Thanks, Chair.
Yeah, no thanks. Can I allow?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, Chairman, as I'm standing here, I'm representing thousands and millions of young people, especially the marginalized from the rural areas. And it's good to see you, Honorable Minister. Chairman, we've been sponsored by the Department of Arts and Culture to go around the country. We're running a program called Voice of June 16, which was mostly in the remote areas of our country. So I think for me, Honorable Minister, if we are saying we want to see this program to happen here and keeps catering for those who stay in the suburbs, and we neglect the majority of our people who experience poverty on a daily basis, we are not going to achieve transformation. One of the issues I raised yesterday is to say that we had a lot of funding bodies which came here, which are actually the biggest gatekeepers of the creative industry. The same people who are here are the same people who are corrupt, who are actually asking for kickbacks from some of the people who are here when they are funding them. So we are saying as young people, Honorable Minister, we are the ones who are always marginalized and who do not access funding most often. But what we are saying as SACAIF, South African Arts and Culture Youth Forum, is that we are not going to be part of talk shows because a lot have been said. We've been attending a lot of gatherings. I will agree with you today, Riyadh, to say that we want to see this program have results. And we are saying, Honorable Minister, as young people, you know, we are very radical and we are honest to ourselves. We don't speak too much English. A lot of people have been speaking English here. So we want to see action because the same NAVF, Honorable Minister, that you always say we must go, has got the same officials who are corrupt. Some of them, they are here. The same people that are actually gatekeeping us. So we are saying, Honorable Minister, we are happy that you took some steps against those institutions and agencies of the department. And you had some sort of, there was a lot of investigation and some of the people were fired. We are saying to you, Honorable Minister, you must fire those as well who are gatekeeping us who are here. And we are saying this issue of talking of transformation and we don't change policies, we're going to still come here and cry about funding and what. So if we really want to make transformation, Honorable Minister, we must say to the Parliament, these policies are not working for our people and black people. We must change them because we keep talking. When we go to this funding, the CEO of NAVF will tell us, no, we can't do anything. The problem is the policy. We are saying to you, Honorable Minister, we didn't write that policy. So these policies that were done to gatekeep black people by some people that we don't know, they must actually be put aside so that the industry can move forward. As I'm finishing, I'm saying that on behalf of young people, we wrote the department, Honorable Minister, to say that we want to see filmmakers from the 9 provinces. But here you've got job beggars, as if South Africa is job beggar alone. So we're saying, as we move forward, let's have a real South African Film Summit that represents the majority of those who are shooting in the rural areas. Because at the end of the day, if we just have Joburg people, we can't hear those small things that are on the ground. With these few words, we would like to thank everybody and also to thank the department for this program. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Can I request Minister to come and address us? As I had indicated, time is on our side.
Very democratic chair, program director. You couldn't find them. Okay. But just to express my gratitude and that of the ministry and any inadequacy of the young lions like we did.
having Romeo to sign off. That was something. And some of the young lions here in front of us who really work tirelessly like everybody else. Thank you very much. Thank you. You can take your seat. We thought it was important to go where we were supposed to, and that is the getting the industry to really deal with its issues as an industry. Having thanked the reference group, once more I want to thank our friends, our brothers, our sisters from across the